is officially open with the first pick, with the second pick,
with the 32nd pick.
The Detroit Lions select, the Jacksonville Jaguars select, the Carolina Panthers select,
the Green Bay Packers select Jordan Love.
Oh my God.
Come on. I cannot believe it.
One of the best times to draft a quarterback is when you don't need one.
Why didn't you get a wide receiver in a wide receiver rich draft?
Packers window is closed.
We're talking sports with Evan, joined tonight by Newt Westen. Going to talk some NFL draft. In the open, you heard there's something I threw together a couple years ago with just some quick soundbite and that little tone there, and I have the quick tone here. Best noise to be out there is you hear that, you know the NFL draft is here, and the volume's a little low there, so let's do it again.
Yeah, there you go.
For NFL draft nerds, because that means the next Goodell is walking to the podium and he's about to announce who the next pick is. But we're sitting here in February. The Super Bowl is coming up shortly. NFL draft a couple months away in Green Bay. And Newt, want to thank you for coming on to conversation with me about the NFL draft.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to be here. This is it's kind of exciting for me as we start rolling into the season. You know, last week we're talking about Senior Bowl and talking about draft starting in Mobile. So it really does feel like that time is here, whether you want to call it like your least favorite season because the NFL is coming to a close. For me, this is like, man, my most favorite season because that draft season is here. We're starting to talk about what teams could look like. We're starting to look at those players. They're going to be hearing their names called in April. So it's really, really fun and exciting time right now.
Well, usually I'm live on X and YouTube and Facebook, talking more current event, talk about a lot of Packer, Wisconsin-centric sports. But YouTube will be the exclusive channel for all the NFL draft content I'm going to be putting out there. And this is the first of hopefully many different episodes of me talking NFL drafts. You're the first person up who I have talking NFL drafts. So I appreciate you jumping on. But the Packers, let's quickly recap 2024 before we jump to the draft. Finished the year at 11-6, and typically, any year you finish at 11-6, you're happy. You're either winning the division or at worst finishing second, and you're probably hosting a home playoff game, or even possibly competing for a bye. But it's an odd season in the NFC. The Packers finished third, finished 1-5 in the division with this 11-6, and for the second year in a row, they're sitting with the 7th seed. And unfortunately, they couldn't get out of the first round of the playoffs this time against the eventful NFC champion Philadelphia Eagles. So, just some quick thoughts that you have on this past season.
Yeah, you know, it was crazy to talk about this season coming up because everyone expected, I think, the NFC North to be the best division in the NFC. However, they didn't expect the teams that were up there to be up there. I think the conversation was, you know, Lions really looked like a firm lock for number one, which they showed out to be. And then the conversation really centered around the Packers. And I know a lot of sports media outlets put the Packers really as a strong contender to push the Lions for that top spot. But the Vikings coming out of nowhere, I think, was really a tribute to them, the coaching staff that you've seen over there, and all the pieces that they put together, plus that resurgence of Sam Darnold and him kind of finding his spot. And then the Bears, you know, kind of being that sticky division rival. Over the last 5 years, it's been good eating against them. But this year, it proved to really be kind of that tipping point. You know, the first game we get against them, you could argue we might not have gotten that in, you know, 9 out of 10 other situations with that blocked field goal, and obviously losing the regular season finale to them was a bit of a heartbreak. So I think this season, if you take a look at the Packers, you see that kind of weird start with the loss to the Eagles in Brazil, the little bit of a rough patch that we were able to get through while Jordan Love's hurt, and then finding a really strong groove halfway through the season. We beat some really good teams. If you're talking and taking a look at the LA Rams, they're going to be a playoff team. You see us dismantle the 49ers and the Seahawks, two teams that were kind of right in the middle that were competing for a little bit. We played really, really well against them. But then as the season kind of went on and it got to the end, we really drove off a cliff and had a struggle to find any sort of momentum. And I think the one thing I heard at the end of the season in terms of the Packers for their look forward to next year's the word accountability. And I think it's a really good mantra. And I think it sums up kind of how the season ended. I don't think there's any Packer fan that really felt good going into the playoffs and the postseason. They saw those 3 losses to the division and also, going up against a team that we had also lost as well, the Eagles, and really, really made it a struggle to have kind of that momentum on our side as opposed to last year when we were building that towards the end of the season.
Yeah, and obviously the season didn't end how we wanted with the loss to the Eagles, but the frustrating thing is that every loss the Packers had this year, it wasn't that the other team was that much better than them. The Packers just made mistakes a young team traditionally makes, and they couldn't get out of their own way, and that's ultimately what ended their season. And 2025, the young excuse can't really be an excuse anymore because now you're in year 3, and it's kind of put up with shut-up time. But with the end of the season comes the off season where we're going to have free agency coming up in March, and then we're going to have the draft coming up in Green Bay, Wisconsin, and the draft this year is in Green Bay, Wisconsin. As I just said, any thoughts on the draft this year in Wisconsin?
I think it's exciting. I can go back to what was the decision made about 5 years ago. They had kind of finally pulled the trigger, and I know there's really a lot of talk and a lot of push to get it here. And Goodell seemed like he was bought in. He obviously will never commit to a Super Bowl being here, but I think he really did want to get it up to Green Bay and getting it here. There's been in the community in the area, ever since that decision was made, a lot of people that are really excited. You talk about sports in Wisconsin, you talk about Badgers, Bucks, Packers, and Brewers, and that's not necessarily the case in a lot of other states where you have 5-10 sports teams. Well, with Wisconsin, you got 3 major sports teams and a pretty big college, Marquette, if you want to toss them in there as well. But you bring something that's as large as football, the NFL, and then you put a huge premier event in Wisconsin. It's a lot of fun. It's really exciting. You're going to see the surrounding areas of Green Bay really, really flock and be excited that they have the opportunity to kind of showcase where the heart of the Lombardi Trophy was born.
Yeah, I'm planning on going up to Green Bay. I have a brother that lives in Kimberly, so I don't have to worry about paying ridiculous amounts of money for housing up there. But when the draft does roll around, I want to get your thought on the 2025 draft class. I've seen some pundits talk about how top end talent wise, it's not how it normally is. It's kind of a down year when it comes to top talent, and obviously the quarterback position. There's really 2 quarterbacks that are probably locks to go first round. And what's your general thoughts on this year's draft class?
So I think you look at the draft in 2 ways. Number one, you look at blue chip players. And I think this year compared to last year, I think last year was a special draft class. Number one, I had 7 blue chip players. To me, a blue chip player is going to be a guy that's special. Now, I'm not throwing around the word generational talent, but he's a special player. He's one that can step in immediately day one and be a stellar contributor, someone that you're excited to get out there because he's going to be a game changer. And so this year, looking at it, I have 4 blue chip players. So a number that's a little bit lower there when you're looking at the top end talent. Overall grades for my first round players, I'm also down 5 players. So kind of that top tier talent is down a little bit. But then the other thing that you look at when you compare a draft class from one to the other is going to be the quarterbacks. And inevitably, it always falls that way because of how important that position is. When you take a look at the game of football, the quarterback is, and I'll stand by this till the day I die, the most important position in sports, period. I don't care if you're comparing sports from any other nationality across any other competition. Quarterback is the number one most important position. So when you have a draft class that does not have that premier talent at quarterback, it also does kind of bring the overall feeling of that draft class down a little bit.
There we go. Okay, I got my mic unmuted there for a minute.
Yeah.
Looking at this year's draft class, I'm seeing, I'm on your website, and the consensus number one guy that I'm seeing for the most part, and you have the same guy, Travis Hunt. He's a wide receiver. He's a corner. Obviously, he can't play both sides of the ball at the level he did in college and NFL, right? So he's going to have to probably lean towards one position over the other. Is there a position you feel he's better fit for the NFL at?
So as I've graded him, I've seen him now on both sides. I've scouted him for both wide receiver, cornerback, and I truly think he is a better wide receiver than he is a cornerback. I think he's stellar at both. I have a first-round grade on him for both positions. So when we're talking about this guy being a two-way player, it's not Sione Vaki might be a really good example of that, where he played both running back and safety last year. This is not a player like that, he was playing both positions in college out of need. No, this guy is legitimately a star-studded first-round talent, wide receiver and cornerback. I think he's a better wide receiver, but I think due to the nature of how the NFL and schemes are created in the NFL, most people are kind of on the consensus that he'll end up on defense. So a lot of times when you're seeing Travis Hunter's name, you're seeing him almost considered a cornerback who will come in as that third or fourth wide receiver on specific packages on offense. And the reason for that is just the nature of trying to get him into an offensive playbook and limiting that when you have him as that third or fourth wide receiver option, and that being more accessible if you were playing full-time cornerback versus if you're playing full-time wide receiver. It's a lot more challenging to put yourself into a gadget or a minor role in a defensive playbook. Typically those guys that are playing that nickel and dime back, they're still comprehending the defensive playbook and spending a lot of amount of time on that at a really high level because they have to have a good understanding of where those things are. So I think Travis Hunter will be looked at more as a cornerback that can play wide receiver. I like him better at wide receiver, but I've kind of been looking at this now and toying with this for months. You say he's not going to do that. I don't be surprised if you see this guy putting in 90 snaps a game because he's playing 100 snaps, 100% of the snaps on defense and in an 11 personnel system. 50% of the snaps on offense. I truly think he could push to really get a ton of playing time early on.
So we have Hunter. We have his teammate Shedeur Sanders, quarterback Colorado. Where do you see Sanders? And I'm bringing him up in particular because he's a name that everybody knows. Huge microscope during his time at Colorado, playing with his father. I've seen mock drafts putting him in New York. I've seen mock drafts putting him in Vegas. Where do you see him going in the draft? And do you think he's a good NFL prospect, or is it more a name than anything?
I think that he's got traits that he could be a starting NFL quarterback. Currently, I have a second-round grade on Shedeur Sanders. I do not think he's a true first-round talent. Some things that go into that is going to be positional need. When you have a player that plays a position, it's a premier position, and you have teams at the top that need that premier position, that's going to boost his stock up there, which is kind of why you're seeing Shedeur Sanders in that top 5 conversation. I think he has legitimate talent to be that NFL player, but I think he does have some things that hold his game back. I think the processing currently for him is something that has been a struggle, and you've seen that due to his number of sacks that he's taken over his collegiate career. A lot of people will point to the poor offensive line at Colorado, but you can almost say about 50% of the sacks were just pure coverage sacks that were taken because of a poor decision made by Shedeur to hold onto the ball. So I think there's a lot of things that he still has to learn along the way. However, I think that he brings some elite traits to the game. He's got amazing accuracy for a player that is looking to kind of dial that ball in around the field. I think that he does make good decisions when throwing the ball. He rarely puts the ball in harm's way. I talk about a stat for a quarterback's turnover worthy play percentage. He is among one of the lowest in the league at 1.5%. So that's going to be something that's really, really key to his resume. And I don't think that many teams are going to bat an eye at taking him kind of in that first 5 picks because of going back to those two things. I truly think the ceiling for him is the number 1 overall pick. I don't think right now he will be the number 1 overall pick. I don't think he'll be the number 2 overall pick. I think right now, number 3 with the Giants is kind of where that starts at. But we've got a long way to go and some things that could change that. And when you have the Titans, Browns, Giants, Raiders, amongst other teams, Jets at the top, that all need a quarterback, that elevates a player that might not be a top 10 or even a first-round talent into that conversation because of that positional need.
Yeah, and I know you mentioned that. Well, now he ended up having a very good rookie season, but Bo Nix was kind of that situation. Was he a first-round talent quarterback? No, but he ended up going in the first round because he's a quarterback, and people draft quarterbacks a lot sooner than they normally would. But who are some other names in this year's draft that people should know? Obviously, I mentioned Hunter, mentioned Sanders. Who are some other guys people should know as potential first-round picks?
Yeah, so I'll list off. I said I had 4 blue chip prospects this year. Travis Hunter being the top of them. And then you come in with Abdul Carter, who, if you're looking at any given draft board right now, you're probably going to see Travis Hunter and Abdul Carter teetering back and forth. Abdul Carter is a edge rusher out of Penn State who actually played Mike linebacker last year, played off-ball linebacker, and he is a freak athlete. He's going to be a player that will win based off of his athleticism. However, he also does have a good understanding of the game. He's got some technical refinement to him. And that's after playing edge for just 1 season. There's some deficiencies in the game. A lot of that is due to that raw nature of him. But he is an electric player. And if you take a look at him and compare him to edge rushers in previous classes, where you're talking about the top players, you take a look at Will Anderson Jr., you look at Aiden Hutchinson, the Bosa brothers, he's right up there. And he's definitely going to push to be a premier edge rush talent. Mason Graham is going to be another player at the top when you're looking at players that have the ability to wreck the game along that defensive line. That's going to be a really important piece. He's going to be an interior pass rusher that has the ability to play 3 downs. He's going to be an adequate run defender as well. He's not going to give anything up there, but he's a special player. I've kind of compared him to I like making that Aiden Hutchinson comparison. He's not an edge rusher, but he's a Michigan player. He's going to have that work ethic, that ability to kind of be a game wrecker, but just on the inside. And then the last blue chip talent I have is Ashton Jeanty, running back out of Boise State, an absolutely electric player. A little bit smaller in stature, but you heard him probably throughout the collegiate football season pushing to break Barry Sanders. I'm sorry, not Barry Sanders, the collegiate rushing record. And it's going to be one that he's just had that year that everyone was kind of like, okay, he's probably in the mix for top 3. If he can stand out, then yeah, he's going to blow up. And he absolutely did. So Ashton Jeanty is going to be that last guy within there. Besides that, we've got a couple wide receivers that are making a little bit of buzz in the first round, namely Tetro McMillan, going to be probably more so wide receiver, truly wide receiver 1 on a lot of people's boards, depending on how you see Travis Hunter, other players, and going to include Kelvin Banks and Will Johnson. They're going to be little tweeners for tackle guard, both really good players along the offensive line. Just where they fit is going to be a little bit of suspect. And then if you take a look at the safety position, kind of like year back with Kyle Hamilton 3 years ago, I believe, where you've got a stud safety that is going to kind of make his mark and make his name known amongst that top 15 selection. He's a fun player to watch. He's from Georgia, a real game wrecker in terms of playing that ball hawking defensive back in the Georgia backfield.
Cool. Joined with Newt Westen, talking NFL draft. I'm Evan with Allison. You can find Talking Sports with Evan on X at Evan with Sports, at Talking Sports with Evan on Facebook and on YouTube. And you were right with Barry Sanders when you're talking about the rushing. The thing with
Barry Sanders, okay.
You were right with Barry Sanders. I think maybe I had mentioned Dion, and maybe that was too many Sanders you talked about.
Emmitt Smith popped in my head. I'm like, oh shoot, was it Emmitt Smith? And I didn't want to commit to it. I got scared. I did.
But again, you could tell by your background. If I was in my usual spot, you would tell by mine that we need more Packers. I'm a big Packer fan. You're obviously a Packer fan. I'm just in a different location than my usual office here. But the Packers finished, as I mentioned, the year 11-6. Going to have some free agency. People leaving via free agency, but inconsistent pass rush. Your wide receiver room, you're going to be out Christian Watson till I think his dad said November. Not sure if Romeo Doubs is going to be able to play after sustaining another concussion in a very short amount of time. Cornerback room is Jair Alexander, a huge question mark, and outside of him, not a lot of depth. It obviously use more offensive linemen. What are some areas you see the Packers going in this year's, especially in the first round of the draft?
Yeah, so I think a lot of that.
Can't say why
centers.
They never take wide.
Yeah, I know. The wide receiver was not gonna even pass my lips. I promise that. Those that don't know, the Packers regime, Goody has kind of followed in place that the Packers will not draft a wide receiver first round, and if they do, it would be historic. What's that?
When was the last time?
2003. Yeah, right, early 2000s.
No,
it's been more than. Yeah. Christian Watson was kind of they're looking to make it. And I heard rumblings that they actually did want to move up into the first round for Watson. Didn't work, but they got him early second round. But I think that if you take a look at the Packers, truthfully, there are 4 positions that are going to stand out to them. And they're all going to be premier positions. So you take a look, number 1, cornerback is going to be a need for them. I think a lot of this conversation starts on what happens with Jair Alexander. This has been 2 years in a row that he's given us not less than 50, but right around 50% productivity in terms of just games being available. That is going to be an absolute detriment. And when you're talking about paying a guy top 5 salary to effectively not play the game and not cause an impact. Now, when he's on the field, he's electric. Maybe took a little bit of a step back this year, but if you take a look 2 years ago, he has been absolutely amazing. Those injuries, though, they feel like they're really starting to catch up. So his cornerback is going to be 1. Edge rusher, Lucas Van Ness has not panned out, and right now it's Rashawn Gary, and then question mark. So a lot of issues right there that are persisting with that. Wide receiver is already mentioned, but we know we're not going to grab a wide receiver in the first round. And then offensive line, and this is kind of where I might differ from a lot of people. The way that I start to look at this and the way I start to approach this is I want an offensive tackle. And I know you might say, well, we have Rasheed Walker, we have Zach Tom. The offensive tackle seems like it's shored up. When you have Sean Ryan and Josh Myers probably on their way out or not looking to kind of be that starting player next year, I want Zach Tom to take the position of center. I want the Packers to move him back there and to potentially draft an offensive tackle early on. So I look at that and I see 3 positions that the Packers might go in terms of their first round pick: cornerback, edge rusher, offensive tackle. Those are really where I see them looking.
Yeah, and knowing the Packers are probably going to go a completely different direction than what they're taking. I don't think anybody had Morgan being the guy last year, but Myers free agent. I'm guessing they're going to let him test the waters. You mentioned Van Ness. Kenny Clark had a very disappointing year too at defensive tackle. Is defensive tackle a sneaky position? Because you got Clayton that's going to be a free agent. Kenny Clark gave you nothing. And you have Carl Brooks, and the other name escapes me at the moment. But at the end of the day, they're just guys who contribute on occasion. Is D tackle a spot they could do in the first round?
I think it is. It's a sneaky. I like the word you use, sneaky. I don't necessarily see it. I think one of the things the Packers regime does really well is they do focus on premier positions in the first round. Now, you take the one thing you got to do is take a look at the Quay Walker and Devontae Wyatt year, and you got to kind of pull that out because they did go off-ball linebacker and defensive interior that year when they had those 2 first-round picks. That was a Christian Watson year. But outside of that, they're drafting cornerbacks, they're drafting quarterbacks, they're drafting edge rushers, and they're staying pretty true to a lot of those pieces. But with that being said, I think this defensive interior class breaks really well for the mid-20s, you've got guys that fall in that range that are named Kenneth Grant, Walter Nolan, Derek Harmon, Tyleek Williams, and those are going to be really, really big names and a defensive interior group that has the opportunity to be game wreckers. There's no way you're going to see that premier talent of Mason Graham falling there, but those four guys beyond that are going to have the opportunity to probably be somewhere around that mid-20 mark. Now, I think this defensive interior group is actually fairly deep. And I think if you're looking to wait till the second or third round to grab a defensive interior position, that's not a bad bet. There are a lot of guys in the second round that you could grab with that pick and really walk away feeling pretty good about where you're at. But I do agree that when you take a look at Kenny Clark getting a little bit up there in age, him being a larger contract number as well, when you're talking about Packers and what are they going to do in the offseason, he's a guy that leaves you with a little bit of question mark, but I think ultimately he will be back next year. But they're definitely looking to probably backfill that position a little bit.
Well, I didn't bring it up for the question I just asked you because I was mostly focusing on they could take it the first round. But linebacker is clearly a position of need on this Packer defense. It can be addressed in free agency or in the draft, just like any of these positions can. But Edgerrin Cooper is probably the only starting quality for sure linebacker you have. If Quay's starting next year, so be it. Maybe his contract year, he continues to build off how he finished the year. But he has not shown to me more than just a guy at this point. Wilson is a free agent. He's been a journeyman. Isaiah McDuffie is more of a special teamer. Is there any day 2, day 3 linebackers that the Packers should keep their eyes on?
Yeah, I like the idea of them kind of hitting linebacker hard, but not early. This linebacker class is back heavy, but definitely not front heavy. You got Jahad Campbell, who probably stars the group, and you're probably not going to even hear his name come off until maybe like late first round, but probably more like that early to mid second round, I think personally. And then after that, you have kind of this conglomeration of guys that fit that late second, early third pool really, really well. So I think this is a group that if you feel really comfortable with a guy, and we know that the Packers like athletic guys, they like guys that test out really well, longer guys that have the ability to kind of hit some of those extra coverage thresholds, and then as well as that blitzing and getting to the quarterback when they're asked to do multiple things. Look at Edgerrin Cooper this year and what he was able to do. So I think that if you're taking a look at where the Packers are going, I don't think you'll see them going day 2 a linebacker, because like we talked about already, positional need and premier positions, linebacker not being one of them. But I think that if you look at that 4th round, you can start to find some of those players in there that fit well because of the number of players that once you get after that 2nd round, you have a good core of players that kind of fall in the draft pretty well there.
You're Brian Gutekunst. You're on the clock. You get to make the selection for the Packers. As on February 3rd, and we're reporting this, who are you taking right now at pick 23?
I'm going to toss 3 guys at you. It depends kind of on where they are, and it also depends on what happens in free agency. Benjamin Morrison has been a guy I've been really high on. A lot of it's going to be decided on him around medicals, but he fits everything the Packers look for in a cornerback. And I think if you take a look at that, that's going to be a position that the Packers become very, very thin at, especially when you put that giant question mark on Jair Alexander. So I'm going to put Benjamin Morrison there as number 1. I really like Mykel Williams for the Packers. Mykel Williams is a guy that's extremely high variance. You'll see guys that have him top 10. You'll see other guys that don't even have him in their top 40. So he's going to be a guy that's all over the place. The problem is his production in college playing for Georgia just has not been there yet, but he's a toolsy player. The best player that you can compare him to is going to be, it's escaping me, Jaguars' first overall pick, Trayvon Walker. I don't think he's as good as Walker. However, the combine will tell us a little bit of those testing numbers. But I think he's a player that has the ability to be a big impact immediately on rush and then kind of developing some of those pass traits based on his athleticism. I think legitimately he'll be there for the Packers, and I think he ticks all their boxes in terms of athletic ability. And this is kind of a dream pick for me, but I've seen this in a couple. If Calvin Banks falls to the Packers at 23, he is number one. I don't care who else is there. I'm sprinting the card up. I'm taking Calvin Banks, and I'm, like I said, pushing Zach Tom to play center. Jordan Morgan is coming back at guard next year, and then that gives you a line of Rasheed Walker, Elton Jenkins, Zach Tom, Jordan Morgan, and Calvin Banks Jr. That is all already a huge step up. And you take a look at kind of where the Packers' struggles are, that offensive production. So I think that would be like my dream right there. If it happens, that's to be seen. But those are kind of the three guys I'd toss out.
Well, I appreciate you coming on, having a conversation with me about the draft. If you want to let people know where they can find your work really quick before we wrap things up.
Yeah, no, you can find me at NFL Draft _Weston on Twitter. That's where I'm going to put most of the content. As Evan's been alluding to, I do also run zerotechdraft.com. That's going to be where I'm posting my big board. The minute that the Super Bowl ends, I shouldn't say the minute, right after the Super Bowl ends, probably a day or two, I'll put up my first mock draft. I'd like to kind of reserve that until I know the full order. I'll post player scouting reports as well as position rankings. I also do that, a lot of that on Twitter. And then also, if you're looking ever to kind of find me talking regularly, I appear on NFL Draft Professors podcast at NFL Draft Fanatic. You can find him every Thursday at 8 p.m. Central Time. Great podcast that does a lot of the things that kind of Evan's talking about as well with the draft. They're going to be for all the NFL. What Evan's doing is really, really great for all things Packers. And really, that's what I kind of love about this appearance right here. I've been talking about every position group out there a ton. I've been talking about other teams and kind of needs and everything. But it is really, really nice to just get back to talking about the green and gold, baby.
Yeah, it definitely is. I appreciate you coming on once again. More draft content will be coming. You can find Talking Sports with Evan on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. I guess X if you want to be technical. I don't want Elon to block me on that. I'm calling it the wrong name. But anyways, I digress. But make sure to give me a follow at Evan with Sports or at Talking Sports with Evan on Facebook and YouTube. Live shows every week as well. Thank you for joining me today. I appreciate it and look forward to seeing your future work.
Thanks, guys.